welcome to today Dive Into Reiki interview. As usual, I'm very excited, but today I have a very special guest, Ifetayo White, and she'll tell you what her beautiful name means during the interview. But she's a Reiki Master and teacher who's the founder and director of the Lowcountry School of Reiki in Helena Island, South Carolina. She's practiced and taught Reiki for more than 25 years, and she was attuned again to Reiki in 2020 by Frans Stiene of the International House of Reiki. This work and her training as a massage therapist and Jin Shin Do acupressure practitioner and 10 years of experience working in mental health has created a container for her practice in somatic healing and traumatic memory stored in the body. For Ifetayo, Reiki is the foundation of everything she does in her life and is devoted to the daily practices of embodying her spiritual practice in daily life. Thank you so much, Ifetayo, for joining me. Like, I see you and I just smile, So thank you so much for just giving me the time for this interview.
Just a pleasure, total pleasure to be here. And every time we come together, I have chills and tingles and excitement, Natalie. It's Thank you so much for inviting me to
Me
this
too.
space.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, it's gonna be a love fest. I'm sorry. So I would
Yes.
love to start the interview the same way I start every interview. Is what was your first experience with Reiki? How did you come into Reiki, and how did that journey begin?
It's interesting. It's an interesting journey. My first experience with Reiki was in 1980. I would think around 1984. And I'm from Washington, D.C. And in the 80s, around that time, I was meeting the first Reiki practitioners. My first encounter with Reiki practitioners in DC. And eventually, one of my best friends became Reiki one first. She eventually became a Reiki master, became my Reiki. But initially, around 84, she became Reiki. And at that time, I don't think anyone was charging for Reiki, at least my friends weren't. And so we were all lined up all the time waiting to receive Reiki. And fortunately, Natalie, my friend, I owned a duplex house, and she rented the first floor. So it was always like nonstop Reiki, and they had a lot of Reiki shares. So yeah, it became a go-to for me for any discomforts or just, and even when practitioners wanted to practice, I was always with my hand up and felt I can't I try to remember what was I feeling. I know that I felt better. That's all I can think right now because it was quite a while ago. And I personally was not at all thinking about becoming a practitioner or a teacher. I was just really interested in receiving.
That's a
Yeah.
beautiful, right? Most of us actually can receive.
And yeah. And it was, it took many years for me of receiving before I became attuned because, as I said, it was around 84, and I became attuned Reiki 1 and Reiki 2 in 94, 95. For my 50th birthday, this same friend who had become a Reiki master asked if she could gift me Reiki 1 and 2. And at that time, I was a massage therapist and reflexologist, and I was I was devoted to those practices, and I really did not feel a calling to Reiki, and but I, I loved the practice, but I felt as though I had good energy in my hands. Everyone said you have good energy, and my friend was assuring me that I not had an attunement, and there was some more for me to know and experience, and so I didn't initially say yes to her offer, but I said, let me meditate on it. I was a big meditator also at that time. I meditated a lot. And I said, so in my meditation, what I felt and received guidance was receive the gift. And that's all I heard. And that's profoundly, the gift has been the gift that has continued to give, has continued to give always. So on my 50th birthday, and 2 months later, I became Reiki 2. And in 99, 4 years later, a student of my Reiki master, who have become a Reiki master, needed someone to practice with. She said, "Can I attune you as a Reiki master teacher?" And I was like, "Sure." I hadn't planned to teach. That was not my plan. And so I tell so many of my students, Reiki has its way with you. Reiki called me more than I called it to me. So it's divine. And Reiki is my life now. And this has been years, years since.
No,
And
it's
then,
such a beautiful story. For me, a couple of things that really I highlight from this is first that you were able to receive first. A lot of Reiki practitioners, we want to give sessions where really the concept of receiving and being open, even as a teacher, to receive is very complicated for many of us.
yes,
So,
yes,
and then the part that you sat with it, do I want this? It's like if receive it, right? The inner connection, the clarity that you had is beautiful.
yes, I don't know how to explain it except that's how it was. I don't quite know why this my journey was that way, and my friend, who was my first Reiki master, no longer practices. And um, it's just an interesting when you just think about how did this come to be. I was the first Reiki master in Beaufort, South Carolina, when I moved to South Carolina in 2000. And that was interesting. And Beaufort, I live on St. Helena Island, but Beaufort, we live in Beaufort County. So I'm on an island off of the coast of Beaufort. And so it's still the same place, different, more rural, more, where I live. Um, but as I said, Reiki has its way with us. It's divine. So we can't control it, as you know, from practicing. So our lives, our, our lives are influenced all nonstop by Reiki and our practices. Informed is the word I want to say. My life is informed by Reiki. Let me say that, and my teaching and my practicing, and the students. You learn, just always learning from the students, and from my beautiful Frans, who is my Reiki master teacher of my heart and soul. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing, right? Because it happens to us that we learn Reiki, we connect with it very strongly, and it calls us. I remember I did the Reiki Master because I kept seeing Daikomyo, which I had seen on the magazine, show it up on my head. It's like, what is this, right? After
Yeah.
8 years of being a Reiki too. But there's some books, there's some teachers who transform us and
Yes.
change our understanding. And I wanted you to talk a little bit of that process in your case.
Oh, I would love to. I'm so deeply grateful. And I shared some on Facebook recently. I had been a Reiki master. I had been teaching for 20 years before I met Franz. And prior to that, a year before I met him, one of my master's teacher students had seen his book somewhere, The Heart of Reiki, and she said, "Oh, Ifetayo, you have to have this book." And she bought it for me. And again, I couldn't put it down. I've read it over and over. I have a copy. I wish I could show you right now. It's so dog-eared. I buy new copies and give them away, Natalie, and I just keep my copy. But I that became my Bible in so many ways. I learned so much. I could feel something transforming in myself. And then I saw an announcement from the Omega Institute that Franz would be in New York in May 2020. And there was no doubt that I would not be there. So I did. I went there and I met him, and we were chanting the precepts in Japanese. And I was like, "Oh, I don't know." Yeah. Not that I had a question about that, but it was seemed impossible for me to learn Japanese and chant precepts. But meeting Franz, and since that time, he came to my home in St. Helena, February of 2020. I met Franz in 2019, uh, May. He came and taught Reiki 3 Shinpiden Reiki level at my home to 12 women. And in rural South Carolina, I couldn't believe he would come. He came. We had a wonderful time, and I have not been the same since then. My whole practice has transformed. I teach more Reiki masters now than ever. I didn't do it. It just, my own personal practices, Reiki practice, daily practices, which I didn't, I had a few, I gave myself Reiki every day. I said my precepts every day before meeting Franz. And now there's a whole lot more that I do every day. and so my life, I am so grateful for him and um, the expansion of my life and my practice and the capacity to reach so many more beautiful beings and to um, to share Reiki with them as I intend. My practice is has the intention of of bringing and supporting beautiful beings back to their true selves and the knowing and living from that place of light within. And that's why I teach, really. It's, you know, and everything else is gravy once one becomes attuned
No,
Reiki.
I love that shift is a very different shift from doing the traditional healing and well-being, and honestly very inclined to physical improvement,
Yes,
to a shift
yes,
of a spiritual practice, right? From energy healing to spiritual practice that has an energy component to it.
absolutely. I've always been a very spiritual person, and I'm a deep seeker. I'm seeking always. So when Franz came, it was like, wow, you know, that connection just filled up everything that my heart had been asking for. And so, yes, Reiki is my spiritual practice, and it is my healing practice, and it is my love practice and everything.
Yes. No, and I love that, right? It's a lot of things. It's energy work, it's spiritual, it's meditation, and it's a more complete. And I think also that's why, for example, you said a lot of people drop out of Reiki, but when it becomes more, it's difficult to let go, right? Because we also embody it in everyday life. Your name has a beautiful translation, and for me, your name, it's almost like the definition of Reiki. So I would love for you to share the translation of your name and a little bit how you see the core Reiki practice.
Yes. Well, my name is a spiritually given name from the Yoruba African tradition. And it is now my legal name. I changed my name legally to Ifetayo Jacqueline White. And Jacqueline was my birth name, which is like equally beautiful. But Ifetayo, given to me by a priest, a spiritual person who saw me and said, "You are Ifetayo." I didn't choose the name, and the name means love that brings joy. And of course, with any name, the request is to grow into that energy. And so, since I was 49, I think is when Ifetayo became my name. So it's been many years of growing, and Reiki has been a big part of that for me, growing into the light that I am, and living and expressing that light, that love, that joy. That's who I am, and I'm so grateful. Yeah,
We are
and you asked me to share about what I now my memory. You have to remind me
the
again.
core, because for me, like love that brings joy and the core of Reiki practice is very similar.
Yes.
We see Reiki practice sometimes. I'm like, I'm doing this, I'm balancing chakras. but it is a joyful practice, right? Like spirituality is often seen as a little bit dry and serious. So for me, I love like love that brings joy, like, and the core of, again, we see as the core of Reiki hands-on healing.
Yes.
But for me, your name is the core of Reiki practice. So I wanted to see.
I love that. I love that you have that you brought that together, and you have me to remember that in my 49th year, the year before I became Reiki, the name was calling to Reiki, I feel maybe, to bring, all of the support that I needed to live out this name, destiny.
It's
Um,
beautiful. Like for me,
yeah.
like I was after we spoke on the interview, I'm like, but this is just the incarnation of whatever. It's almost like pointing towards how our practice should be, right? Like I know we're obsessed with shadow work lately, but it's like, can we let
Yes.
sometimes aside the shadow and just sit in the light and bring some joy into our life?
Yes. Yes.
So for me, that was very beautiful. And then you had something beautiful that you mentioned in the interview, and it comes a little bit about diversity, right? As you said, you're bringing Reiki to rural communities, to people who didn't have access to it. And a lot of time, Reiki is honestly mostly for hipsters or like people who are into the New Age movements in cities, right? And so, but you said in Reiki practice, well, oneness, there is no race, no colors, but at the end, we incarnate who we are so we can bring the access to
Yes.
the practice to other people. So, I
Yes.
don't know if you can elaborate a little bit on that and how you're bringing Reiki practice
Yes.
to different communities.
Absolutely. I absolutely love that question also. And shared earlier, I am from Washington, D.C., and I learned about Reiki in Washington, D.C., in a city, in an urban area. And the I I was I attended the Unity Metaphysical Christian Church at that time for 10 years, and that's where all these Reiki people were. And I was also a transcendental meditator, and there were Reiki people. All of this was sort of mixing up together. And my church was multiracial, but our minister was African American, and so there were just a lot of African American people in that congregation who were very interested in New Age at that time, and in all of and different. Most of us had left traditional religions and found our way there, and learned so much. We were given so much, and so for me, that's where I was nurtured. My first Reiki master is an African American woman. The first Reiki master in DC was African American. Well, the first African American woman Reiki master in DC is a friend of mine, Gwen Mitchell, who's now in California. So for me, it was always everybody did Reiki, and a lot of people of color, a lot of people look like me were practicing Reiki. So I it never I never thought so much about it. And we had our own community in a way of healers and spiritual people in DC who were African Americans, because we were just relating to one another. But as I moved forward, and I when I began teaching, actually was in Beaufort, and after in 2000. And because Beaufort and South Carolina is actually a part of the Bible Belt, the Bible Belt of the South, it was very interesting in 2000 that I was very low key about Reiki. I just didn't, there had been a lot of press around that time from the Southern Baptists and from the Catholic Church about Reiki and it not being as sanctified as we know it to be, as sacred as we know it to be. There was just so I didn't really speak much about being a Reiki teacher at that time, except I was practicing massage. So some of the massage therapists in town knew. So, and my first student there in Beaufort, South Carolina, was a a massage therapist who was from a family who has the biggest tomato business in our county. They still do. They just send out a lot of tomatoes everywhere. So Sally was my first, and since that time, I've been blessed to, because of how I look, Natalie, and we talked about that. You know, I am not attached to any of it. This is just the divine plan that was created before I got here, that for me to serve in the way that I'm created this way, to serve in the way that is the easiest path, probably. So therefore, I will attract to myself many people of color who are African American, not not at all only. I've taught I can't I've taught so many people I can't even tell you, and of all races, and but in rural South Carolina, and people now are traveling to stay with me to learn. It's more of that now than anything, I think, since COVID. And I have an Airbnb, so I have room for people. I've taught Reiki, for cakes, for vegetables, as an exchange, when there is an openness from my community of anyone, then I want to be able to say, yes, you can be Reiki, and whatever, however we can make that happen. I worked in mental health with youth for 10 years. So there were um, teenagers that I worked with who I attuned, because, and particularly a couple of young women who were pregnant and who were going to have babies, and I was sharing Reiki with them, and it just made sense that they should become Reiki for their babies, for themselves, for their mental health, for their birthing experience. So yeah, I am, and oneness is such a dear, it's a vibration of me. Oneness is one of my highest vibrations, and I'm grateful that I live, and that from that place of love and non-duality and no separation, and grateful to be able to serve those folks who look like me, who feel comfortable, because as we know, at and our level of evolution and growth, we will tend to go to people who we feel comfortable with, and who we feel simpatico with. And so it's been a blessing for me that that has, and that I've been able to, um, as shared earlier, my intention for teaching Reiki is to reawaken the truth of who we are inside of ourselves. So for me, if trauma healing begins inside, and the more, and it's, if we are tuned Reiki and are carrying that Reiki energy in us, then the work has begun in healing whatever traumas we are aware of or have been influenced by. So it's just a beautiful gift of my life
I
that I
I
share.
I am so grateful because for me, one of the things I see sometimes the communities, especially in the United States, where the health system is really expensive,
Mhm.
offering to communities who don't have, actually sometimes they can't afford Reiki teaching, offering them Reiki practice. It's great spiritually, but also in terms of humans, right? Like if they have a headache or muscle pain, they cannot always afford a doctor giving them a healing practice that works at all levels. It's almost like a human right and need, right? So I
Yes,
love that.
yes,
I love the cakes.
I do too.
And you were talking about grants as well, that you're working on getting some grants to spread that work.
Yes, I'm really interested, and I've been researching and having other people research for me. Um, I am particularly interested in grants where that will support myself and other Reiki masters in attuning women of color, particularly young women, to become Reiki. And there, because now there are more grants out to address particular challenges in the Black community, and because I am a doula, I don't know, did you say that? Did you know that,
I,
Natalie?
I think I knew it, but I didn't mention because you have so many, like, you were a Russian translator, do like you
Yeah.
have so many abilities that I was like, oh my God.
Well, I'm very still, I don't practice. It's a lot to be a doula. And I just sort of retired a couple of years ago from active doula work, but I support a lot of women in my community who are doulas and midwives. And we're all very familiar with the challenges of, of death rates of women of color in our country, and particularly in our state. We're like one of the highest. So the to receive grants to work either from the doula side, the birthing side, or just from, you know, attuning women um, to become Reiki practitioners, so that they can share with themselves, first of all, with their families and with their community. And that's, yeah, that's the reason why I'm really actively engaged in researching funding.
And you said
Yeah.
something magical. Sometimes, like, I'll just send Reiki to the world, right? Which is beautiful. We want to share that
Oh
light with
yeah.
everyone.
Oh yeah.
But I think part of the practice should be very active, right? Like one thing is we sit, we find our center of light, but we can also be very active in promoting people well-being through practical things, right? Like again, having community Reiki, sharing with our friends. It
Yes.
doesn't have to be all the way to grants, but it goes beyond our massage table. It goes beyond our meditation cushion. So I love the fact that spirit, well, like there is this activity in the real world. It's not just you know but you also do a ritual that I love, because Reiki can be translated as ancestral energy, right? So again, we're born in the body and the history we have with the ancestors we have to carry that healing. So you do a ritual that really moved me very much, and I would love for you to share it with people if you feel comfortable.
And I'm trying to remember which ritual you
The
talk.
one that you go to the beach every day and meditate with.
Oh yeah, I do. Because I have so many practices.
I
Okay, so
know, but then I got like, oh, this is so beautiful and so simple, right?
yeah, that is the and a lot of folks see my photos on Facebook from the beach, and a lot of times I don't take photos, which people don't realize, because I'm at the beach, and I have to get inspired. It has to be something that says you need to take this. So, but I do daily. As daily as I can. I go to the ocean, which is 7 miles from my house, and one of what I had in meditation came to me when I don't know, soon after I moved to Beaufort. That one of my purposes for being here is to go to the ocean and to send Reiki to the Atlantic Ocean, to the path of the slave trade from Western Africa and the other parts of Africa, to particularly South Carolina, which was the hub of the slave trade in America. And so every day, as that is my practice still, that I do send Reiki to that passage and to all the souls, including those folks who own the boats and everybody who was involved. I I send my love, my healing energy, my Reiki energy, and and that's my contribution. And it's a calling. It's a calling. I don't have any other words to say it.
No, but it's
Yeah.
beautiful. Like when I was in Japan, the priest always told me, you don't sit just for yourself, you sit with all your ancestors, right? So again, we're born in the person, in my case, there is probably a lot of World War II trauma, right? Like my whole family was
Yes.
in the middle of it, lots of concentration camps and stuff, and weird
Yes.
things happening. So
Yes.
that again is the energy of my ancestors. So it's very part of Reiki tradition as well, ancestral energy. So I find it very beautiful that we clear that energy that we carry from hundreds of years or
Ooh.
thousands of.
And to me, Natalie, it's not hard. It's not difficult, particularly if you carry Reiki, if you are tuned Reiki. It's just another way of extending love, the love, healing. Love is healing, and connect with our hearts to another energy, which is what trauma is. It all is energy. So we simply extend and expand the love and the Reiki from ourselves to bless whatever situations need to be blessed. So I'm grateful. I'm just so grateful to be. And when you spoke, I want to go back a little bit to when you were talking about activism. And I know Frans is on this call, but to
Yeah.
me, he is a major activist. In his way, he's so the inspiration. You are also in your way. Those of us who are out there, whatever way that we are, in our way of sharing this practice, sharing Reiki, um, is activism to me. And I'm a child of the 60s and 70s. I was an activist in civil rights. I was marching. I was had big afro. I had all. So that's my core. Big part of my spirit. So this is a gift to be able to be Reiki and to be an activist for love and oneness in the world, in our way. It's so beautiful. Thank you, Franz.
Yeah, he's saying that he loves you and he loves our smiles right now. I may bring him back after I give you your drawing to say hi. So, friends, get presentable. But you said something beautiful. So I always been very, and I shouldn't worry because it's against the precept. But one thing that concerns me is sometimes we train people for 8 hours, or sometimes we don't even train them. We attune them to Reiki 1 and we give them a manual. And
Yes,
then they go into trauma healing. And one of my
yes,
concerns is, again, I'm not trained as a therapist. I'm a writer, right? So when I've had classes where people really get like flashbacks. Some really, I tell my students like, don't go healing trauma. But you said something very beautiful that at the end, trauma is fear that is frozen, and by placing a warm hands, we help to soften it, right? So I would love for you to like, if I were a practitioner, a Reiki one, starting my Reiki journey, and I want to work with trauma, what advice would you give someone who's just starting their journey?
oh, well,
I know it's a
I'm a simplist, I guess. I don't know if that's a word. I just made it up. I'm all about simplicity. And what is simple? And to me, energy is simple. Energy is basic. And and as I speak with my students or clients, I always bring it back to the basic. And we're working with energy. And in this case, we're working with energy that has has become frozen or stuck, um, because of whatever the situation is at that time. There was fear that happened that could not be metabolized or could not be released. And Reiki itself, we don't have to program it to 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 address this or address that or address this or address that. I might speak out in public about addressing trauma, but I will I will work in the same way with someone who comes just and I don't know what with whatever they present. I will speak to them in words that they in giving back to them the same words they gave me, so that we will be in a oneness and communication. But my practice is going to be the same. And because I've had mental health background, worked in mental health, worked with women's health, then there's certain, and as a massage therapist, there are some layers of knowledge I have about the body and about emotions and about energy and how it shows up in us. I do have that, but if you are a beginner, you don't need to have that. You want to just be in yourself and be present with whom you're with, and be in compassion with what they bring you, and share Reiki and feel. We can feel when there is a softening. We can feel when there's not a softening. We can feel when energy has begun to move. We can be aware of energy that's not moving. We can comfortably stay in that place, Natalie, and know that we are addressing whatever is being asked to be addressed without worry. And if we're interested in trauma, then there are books that we can read about. There are beautiful works out now, that talk about trauma in ways that everyone can understand. So we can inform ourselves that way, but it's not necessary to, I don't believe. My belief is that we're Reiki and we show up with Reiki. And if Reiki has its own intelligence, and it will do what it is here to do.
I love what you say. For me, like it's also a big lesson, but also it's at the end it's a state of mind, right? You said you go and you just place your hands, right? Because a lot of us as practitioners, we think I have to do something, I need to check what chakra is on balance to release, and I need to release the trauma, right? Like then we go, that is the part, like then we become almost like therapists, which we're
Right.
not. Because
Exactly.
it's just, as you say, it's just being from a place of compassion and being present and just
Yes.
placing the hands. And I think that is probably, as you say, simplest. We have the new work,
Yes.
Reiki
Simplest.
simplest, like it, because it is simple, right? But we make it complicated because we're afraid that it's never enough. That just placing our hands is
Yes.
not enough.
That's a beautiful, that has been a beautiful challenge for, I believe, for Reiki practitioners and teachers throughout my um, experience with Reiki, because of the simplicity, and because we don't have to know a lot. Then we really, often are feeling that we are not doing enough, we're not giving enough, and we're not contributing enough, and nothing could be farther from the truth. Reiki is so profound and strong and powerful. We are contributing, and we don't have to know. We don't have to know what I've done, what has happened, or we we know we are one with our true selves as we sit with a person or stand, and we surrender all that we are into that present moment in time, and share from our hearts and our hands, and know. Just as we practice, as we continue and grow our own personal practices, Natalie, we will know, and without a doubt, without having to have a feedback, we will know that we're enough, we have given enough, and it's all good. Yeah.
That is so beautiful. And as you say, one of my challenges with my students, tell them like keep on practicing because one day it switches and you know it's enough. But it
Yes.
doesn't take a week, it doesn't take 2 weeks, it
No.
doesn't take a year. Sometimes for some people it comes very fast. For some people it took me 8 to 10 years to get there, right? But I was very stubborn. I'm a stubborn person. I'm a Scorpio. I kept on going on it
Yes.
and letting aside, like, okay, let the fears drop. But what you said, I think, is it's for everyone who's struggling with their practice, adding things. And I just think it's such a beautiful message. So thank you so much. And now I'm going to ask you another question that I ask everybody. I always start with the same and end with the same, because I myself learned a lot from my Reiki mistakes. And I believe in a way there are no mistakes, because that's the way we learn, and I encourage people to just explore. But I would like, if it comes to mind, like a big oops, like, oh, wow, I've been doing this and I have to shift it, or like a big learning that came from doing something that people may label as a mistake, even though that's the way we learn. I would love for you to share it.
That's a great question. I oh, okay. Mm, before my knowing for real that there's no mistakes, then I do believe that I was of the consciousness early on in my practice of not enough, not enough. As a massage therapist, there are, that's just a whole different practice, and it can be very physical. We are moving and going deep and touching and shaking and whatever, and then you come to share Reiki. Someone says, well, I just want a Reiki session, and it takes like, okay, yeah. And but in the beginning it's like, okay, so how am I going to make sure this person feels that they have received? It was a very that was a part of my consciousness. I wanted to make sure they felt that they received something from me, just as they felt when I gave them a massage. And so it took a while, it quite a while, I'm sure, quite a while, for me to continue to come in, come in, come in, come in, um, to get out of my head and to accept that I am one with Reiki. I am sharing Reiki, and I don't have to do Reiki. I don't have to force Reiki. I don't have to expect a certain outcome of experience from the person I shared with. So yeah, that took a while, and I can't I can't say to you when it shifted, but as with I'm great with a practice. If I have a practice, that really supports me. So if I'm aware of something and I continue to practice, as I'm, I'm feeling that for that particular challenge, my practice was to continue to come in, Ifetayo, continue to be present and and to sit, as opposed to giving and doing. I'm a big giver. Another thing, I'm a big giver. And the giving doesn't have to, that's another part of my learning, was the overboard of giving, in a lot of ways in my Reiki practice. So even giving more time that was necessary, giving more, just because I wanted that person, those people, to have a certain experience. So again, it's another practice. And since meeting Frans, and since really growing in my own daily practices, of sitting, of being present, of being still, of the breath work, um, all of that in the last 2 years has shifted almost all of what I said to, I mean, it has. All of what I've said to you has just shifted enormously. So I'm gonna say practice, personal practice, personal practice of being Reiki, being Reiki, being Reiki, and all of these other pieces will not be necessary, will not even be a part of our consciousness or thoughts
I
eventually.
I think
Yeah.
honestly, this is the best advice because I probably 95 to 99% of people struggle exactly with that, right? Like one thing,
Yes.
especially when you start professionally and charging,
Yes.
that become,
Yes.
I love that advice. For me, it was the same. The only way I could deal with it is like if I do my homework every day and I go to the session having done my practice and from the right state of mind, I felt like I had to do my homework in order to be able to let go. Now it's more natural after years. But the
Yes.
way I found is like, okay, I can only control what I can control, which is my self practice. And as long as I do my self practice and I go from a state of mind of like love and compassion, I'm fine.
That,
Like,
exactly. And
what I can
I
do.
that's exactly those of us who practice, we get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has also shifted with me since meeting Franz, and studying with him and meditating with him and all of reading always his work every day. The a practice of oneness, of no separation. Before I knew that, I heard that it was good. I gotcha. But since in the last 2 years, and being with COVID, that whole year really has shifted for me. The practice of there is only one of us here. There is no separation. There's no distance. There's no time. There is no separation. And so this has informed my practice with people who are in person so much greater. And those, particularly distance healing, which I never did much of before because there were so many people in my world and life that I shared Reiki with in person. But because of the pandemic, the distance healing requests grew. And my love of distance healing now has just expanded, and the capacity to practice no distance, no separation, no time has been just has given me so much joy, has given me so much joy. And everyone has shared with me, not that I have needed that feedback, but the experience of the receiver has been profound. It's coming from that place, from me, for me sitting in that place of no distance, no separation, no time, and in my own daily practice, strengthening and supporting that. I'm in love with that. I'm in love with oneness.
I just love because, what I love about Reiki practice, and I see it in you, is like you've been practicing receiving and practicing for a lot of time, right? Over 2 decades, and you still finding new depths and new joy into it. And this for me is like is also like an inspiration for everyone. It's like don't think you're gonna get everything the first year. It keeps getting richer if you just open your heart and your mind to it, right? And I love your spark and your happiness about it. I just love it.
And it's, as I'm sitting in this space with you, as you are inspiring these responses, I'm just realizing that I was a practicing doula and a Reiki master teacher, practitioner, Reiki practitioner, and massage therapist. Before I stopped massage, I was doing all of that at one time. And so depending on how many births I had a month would determine how many clients I could take for Reiki or anything. Now it's all Reiki. It's all Reiki. I do nothing else except folks invite me to to present on some larger platforms, but Reiki is underneath it all. I might be talking about some healing or talking about birthing, but for me, it's Reiki under all of it. But I love now the shift since France and since 2019. It's nothing but Reiki for me now. I'm teaching all the time, nonstop, and I share Reiki not as much, but somewhat with folks in person, and a lot at distance. I do mentoring people who call and they want to talk, but mostly it has to do with, well, it always has to do with their growth and transformation. But I usually combine the hour with some distance healing Reiki too. I don't just, we're not just going to spend that time talking, but I am thrilled. And you really, as you spoke, Natalie, that just dawned on me that this is all I'm doing. Reiki is all I'm doing now. And and so my whole life has shifted what I do. And I am writing a book on Reiki. And one day that will be complete in my own personal, um, you know, offering to the world.
And I'm the
Different.
first one buying it. I already told you. I'm already, as soon as you put the pre-sale, let me know and I'm hitting buy. So I can't wait to read that book. So I wanted to share with you the drawing. So the drawing is based on the pre-interview, and then I'll bring a certain Mr. Franz who showed up there. So this is the drawing. I don't know if you can see it well.
I can. Oh,
So it has a little bit, this is your ocean practice that
uh-huh.
we were talking. This
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the part love, bringing joy.
yeah, yeah.
So it's a little bit
Love that.
for our conversation. I'll just email you asking your address to make sure I send it to the
So
right.
beautiful.
But thank
Thank
you
you.
so much because I really enjoyed doing the
Oh,
drawing, and every moment we spend together is just magical. So it's the I hope you like it and it makes
I
it.
love it. I love it. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
if France is comfortable, since you two love each other so much, if you're comfortable, I would love to bring him in. If he's like to say hi. So I'm gonna change the gallery view since yeah, he said yes, of course. I'm changing to gallery because I want to see all of you. So France,
Time
I
of day. What time of day is this for France? I
he
lose track of time like that. I don't
there he
know.
is. Hi France. So I'll let you say hello to both of
Hi.
them.
Hi, France.
What a wonderful interview. Thank you so much. It's
I
just
love you
great.
so much.
Yeah. Well, Ifetayo, I was actually saying today to someone, it's beautiful weather here. And I went at 11 o'clock outside to sit outside on the canal here at a cafe on a little terrace. And I've been sitting there for 6 hours, enjoying the boats, drinking coffee, having lunch. And I was thinking about, for me, you really are my role model. I'll be 55 this year, and I think, wow, at your age, that you're still teaching, you still are in this, when I stayed at your place, you're still in this. The zest of life, you still enjoy life so much, the beauty of life, the playfulness of life, the laughter of life. You still have so much joy and passion for life, and not just for the system of Reiki, but for life itself. That for me is the system of Reiki. Is really as you were discussing, is not, we don't need to add anything to it. We don't need to invent a new system. We need to actually realize that simplicity. And then in that simplicity, that beauty of life can really be tasted and felt. And then I was sitting at this cafe, right? And this little bug entered my throat, and I was coughing. And so now with Corona, everybody's kind of, so I'll go, oh, excuse me, another
Yeah.
Corona. And there was this older woman sitting next to me. And she said, "You're okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And she said, I tap you on your back. And she was tapping me a few times on the back. And then it was just such a nice communication. And I thought, well, that for me is Reiki, that communication with the zest of life, with the joyfulness, with the playfulness, with the openness. That for me ultimately is sharing Reiki, being in that space together of compassion and love.
Absolutely, totally. I love it. And I agree so much with you. Yes, that is Reiki. And that's what we love life. I loved having Franz. He laughs all the time. We just laugh and playful. And that's for me life. That is life, and that is Reiki. That is the energy of healing,
Oh.
love, and joy.
Just
Yeah.
seeing you both smile like makes me happy. And now I have a new goal. I want to like train with both of you together in the same.
We do a class one day.
I don't know if we can survive that, but I think it will be incredible. Ifetayo, is there something that I may have missed that you want to touch base or add? Because you've given me so much beautiful wisdom, but I don't want to miss anything in case.
I don't. I really don't. I can't think of a thing. I will share. You know, we're starting another 21 days tomorrow with Frans of meditation, and meditating. I don't know why. I have to just share that the if for Reiki practitioners to find a practice of meditation that is just um, I, I hate to use the word crucial. It is so necessary for our support to support ourselves and our own health as we practice, as we teach. And so, really, that would be the last word: meditate. Breathe, meditate, holler. It's just those
It's
those are the magic words.
it's the best tip, right? Because we see meditation in many lineage meditation and Reiki, but they're one, right? Like they should be one. Like there are a lot of Reiki meditations. So I'm really glad I asked you that last question because it's the best advice and not the one that we hear a lot, right? So thank you. And I'll be sharing all the links to your webpage and all the things you're doing. So people will find them in the podcast notes. You're also on Facebook, right? You're also on Instagram. You're everywhere.
I'm not on Instagram so much, but you know, yeah. But I have an account.
Yeah, yeah. I just thank you for like pre-interviews. So, but I'll share all that information so folks can join you and reach out to you in case they want to train, mentor, like, or just have a big, beautiful, loving time.
Yeah,
That will
I
be
love
great.
fun. I love to have fun. I love enjoyment. So
And
yes.
for me, honestly, like we joined the interview 10 minutes before, and I just so grateful for sharing my time and getting to meet you through this interview. And I'm glad everybody can get a little bit of that love that we represent. So thank you so much for saying yes. And stay in touch. I'm gonna miss you now. I want more in my life. And Franz, thank you so much for jumping. You
Yes,
just missed
thank
the
you.
first 10 minutes of the interview where you were basically telling us a lot about you. So I'll send you the link so you can see it. And is there anything you want to add since you jumped on the interview?
No, I need to agree with Ifetayo. Meditation essential, really, for that practice. And, be light in your practice, be light in life. And this is what Ifetayo is teaching me. For me, is you're just such a beautiful person to be around with. And, I could snuggle up with you. I mean, you're just
I
like,
know we have. Yeah, that's my
but this
energy.
is this is so beautiful, that just humanness, for me, the system of Reiki, life, humanness is so important. And then it doesn't matter what color we are, what age we are, what sex we are, whatever we are, because ultimately that great bright light is neither female nor male, is neither black or white, it's neither this nor that. It's just love and compassion. And when I'm with Ifetayo, that is really what I feel. And this is why I think we really get on so well, because we both feel that we look beyond these layers and we can feel that essential luminosity of playfulness and compassion. And she's really teaching me that. So yeah, thank you.
You're twin souls. And again,
About 20. You have about you're I'm 76, you're 55. So
I will be
and
55 this year. Look,
this year. The
age is
best is
all.
yet to come. The best is yet to
I hope so. Personally, I hope so.
It is. Take my word. The
Um,
more we practice, I swear to you, I can't even begin to tell you. One day when you read my book, you'll hear about it. It's
I
so
want. I gonna start like every month. Like, where's the book? You know that, right?
yeah. The book is coming.
Well, now I'm like obsessed with it. So I honestly gonna be your accountability, like German kind of partner.
Yes, you're.
I am so grateful to have both of you in my life. You have no idea. Again, joyfulness for me is core of the practice, and I just love sharing time with you both. So thank you,
Thank
Ifetayo, for
you.
giving me the time. Thank you, Franz, for being dressed and jumping out of.
Yes.
And
We're
everybody
grateful
who's
for you being
watching this,
dressed.
thank you so much for the podcast. It's grown a lot, so I people are sharing it. So I'm really, really grateful. And their interviews are reaching almost 1,000 people. So please keep on sharing it because I do believe that the more we hear these interviews, we read and we practice, the richer our practice becomes. And also, and this is a shameful, like shameless ask for help. If you can rate it on the Apple podcast, put 5 stars if you like it. Of course, if you hate it,
Yes.
don't. It helps the algorithm just reach more Reiki practitioners. A lot of us don't have access to train with Ifetayo in person or with friends. We may live in cities where there is not a lot of Reiki masters. So this is a way to help them and support them in their practice. Again, this is a totally non-profit um, podcast. I just want to share these beautiful stories. So if you have time and go on Apple Podcast and put a few stars. If you hate it, do not rate it bad. Thank you so much. And as usual, you can reach me at Dive Into Reiki, and I'll put all the information for Ifetayo and also Franz on the podcast notes. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful Sunday.
You. Bye. You both
Take care.
beautiful people.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Love you both. Love you.
Thank you.
See you
Bye.
in New York, Franz, whenever you come back.
Yay.
See you in
Bye.
New York.
He's coming. Bye.